Howdy, I'm Mike Penfold, and welcome to Our Montana. Our organization really is focused on the outdoors. We live in a great state here. We got these magnificent mountains and streams and landscapes, and we think our job is to help keep these great assets the way they are. The other thing we're interested in is history. One of the things that we learned from looking at Montana history is the role that women played. I mean, certainly we must appreciate the role that the Indian women played in those primitive camps and in their societies as they advanced. And you think about these lonely prairies that women were part of, those homesteaders, make those homesteads prosperous and work. And then later on we had, Montana had the first woman congressman, and women have been involved in important things in Montana from the very start. In the late 1960s, the League of Women Voters came to the conclusion that we really needed a new constitution. So they lobbied hard to get a new constitution. In 1972, a new constitution was adopted. Women played a big role in that constitution. And in that constitution, they also wrote that we in Montana have an inalienable right for a clean and healthful environment. In other words, they set the stage that our government was to help sustain a clean and healthful environment. I suspect in 1972, when that Constitution was adopted, few people understood the crisis of climate we now face. And it's fair to say that the federal government, state government, local governments, and so many of us have not done what we should be doing to secure a clean and healthful environment when you start considering the climate crisis that we now face. And I think many of us understand the huge amounts of money that was poured into trying to persuade everybody that there really was not a climate crisis. It's very hard to deny that we don't face a climate crisis. Pick up any newspaper or magazine article, and there it is in your face. Well, what's really interesting is that a bunch of young people have decided that the state of Montana could do more to secure a clean and healthful environment. And they have decided to sue the state of Montana on the basis that our state policy is for government to help us secure a clean and healthful environment for future generations. One of the leaders of that lawsuit is a young woman by the name of Rikki Held. Rikki grew up on a ranch at Broadus, Montana. And she is a rancher, and most landowners and ranchers understand climate and the weather that comes out of that is having significant impact on their operations. And those of us that live in cities, we see forest fires, burning down buildings. As far as that goes, forest fires all over the world. We see temperatures being broken. We understand the glaciers are melting. And then we have humongous floods in this state here just recently. And we see those all the way across the country. That's weather, but it comes out of a climate that is changing much more rapidly than what the experts thought. So Rikki Held and a bunch of young people decided, with some help from a legal firm, to sue the state of Montana, indicating we think Montana, you could do more to stop carbon going into the atmosphere and help us sustain a clean and healthful environment. The lawsuit's called Held versus Montana. I thought it might be interesting for Rikki Held, a ranching young woman, to explain to actually my granddaughter, who's a 14-year-old young woman who lives in the city, what it is like to live on a ranch and also what they're trying to do with this lawsuit. So I hope you will enjoy this discussion between my 14-year-old granddaughter and Rikki Held, who is the head person on the Held versus Montana lawsuit.
Hi, Alexis. It's great to meet you and be here with you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of where you grew up and maybe where you're going to school?
So I'm going into 9th grade. I'm going to West High, and I was at Lewis and Clark Middle School. I grew up in Montana, but I was always wondering what it'd be like to like grow up on a ranch.
Mhm.
So what's that like?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I grew up in Broadus, Montana, and that's kind of in the southeast corner. I was 4. We got the ranch that my family has, and yeah, just like grew up and like started moving cows when I was 4 and like riding out in the hills, and we had a bunch of different animals. We had cattle and sheep and pigs and chickens and ducks and dogs and cats and horses, and it was mainly my grandma and then my dad and brother and I, and yeah, and my brother and I would like run around and play in the river and in trees or ride around, and yeah, so it was pretty exciting, and I feel really lucky to be able to grow up in a place like that.
That sounds fun. What was school like in Broadus?
Well, my brother and I would just like ride the bus into town. It was like 20 miles on a county dirt road, and then so we went to Broadus Elementary and middle school there, and yeah, it was like growing up in a small town of about 500 people. It was kind of nice because you had that close-knit community, and it's kind of this like ranching community, and so it was a really great place to grow up in and do things like 4-H and have community events like potlucks and things like that. And then I decided to go to high school in Billings, actually. So here I went to senior high, and stayed with some people here to go to high school, and now I'm going to Colorado College in the Springs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
What are you studying?
Well, I'm studying in environmental science, actually, and which I got interested on because of growing up on the ranch, I think, and being close to the environment, and just being outside, and I think growing up on the ranch, you're kind of connected to that side of things, and like ranchers are especially really like they pay attention to the land because like their livelihoods depend on it. Some hydrologists have been studying the Powder River, which borders my ranch, and they've been studying it since like 1978. And so when my brother and I were little, we would go out with them and help do like surveys and take topography of the river and things. So I think that kind of started my interest in science, which continued with high school, where I also learned about climate change and see the importance of studying that. And
What's keeping you busy now?
well, one thing I'm a part of is this climate lawsuit in Montana, and it's pretty exciting. I started when I was 18, and kind of in 2019, and then in 2020 we filed. And so kind of what it is 16 youth plaintiffs. We're suing the state of Montana with Our Children's Trust is a nonprofit lawsuit or law firm. And so we're suing the state of Montana for our constitutional rights and some of them include a clean and healthful environment, and we're suing them because they're supporting a fossil fuel industry that is contributing to climate change and the climate crisis, and the state has known since the 1960s, and they haven't done anything about it, and so that's really concerning, and it seems like we need to make some changes, so that's why we're a part of this lawsuit. So in our Constitution, it's actually really special. We have one part that gives us the right to a clean and healthful environment, which no other state constitution has.
Who are the other kids that are working on this lawsuit?
Yeah, so there's like a big age range. When we filed, I was the oldest at 18, and then the youngest was 2 years old, actually. And so, yeah, we're all just like kids that have grown up in Montana, and kind of got involved because of our with the older kids because of our interest in the importance of this, and understanding how climate change impacts us, and just wanting to make a difference. And so I've actually never met the other plaintiffs in person, which kind of sucks. It's mostly been due to COVID, but I think like we've talked like just like through webinars or like through Zoom meetings a bit, and kids are like super inspiring and like telling their stories, and they're from all over the state, and some of them have been just impacted because of like their like activities outdoors, like a lot of them like fish or like go camping or like play soccer and things like that, and those activities are impacted just because of like variability in the climate and water and our resources being affected, and then also just like things like wildfires and like smoke being in the air that impacts.
Was the big floods we had this summer climate change?
Yeah, so that's like an example of an impact of climate change. Maybe we can't tie that like directly, but climate change does lead to like cause more extreme like events, and like it can cause like increased like wildfires or like extreme like weather events that can lead to flooding, and it's definitely tied together.
Do you have any idea what you're getting out of this lawsuit?
Well, our goal like is to ask the state to come up with a climate recovery plan based on the best available science and information, and that's kind of up to them to do, to protect our constitutional rights and protect the people.
Are you guys trying to get any money out of this?
No. So the organization, Our Children's Trust, they're like nonprofit, and a lot of people are just volunteering their time. Scientists and climate experts, like a lot of it is just like free work, and like the like plaintiffs and our families, we're not going to get any money out of it. We're just doing this because we know that like we have to, and this has been going on for so long, and we can't keep relying on like the next generations to solve things like this.
Does climate have any effect on your ranch?
Yeah. So part of being a part of this case is that we talk about how we're impacted by climate change. And so, yeah, with my ranch, there's things like water availability has changed. My family, we rely on the Powder River, and its water levels are, they're more variable, and things like droughts and flooding can happen. Like in 2007, the river just like dried up and stopped flowing, and then overflows can be caused by like abnormally high temperatures, and that causes flooding, and then like that's almost like flooded my house before, and so yeah, there's water variability. We rely on snowfall up in the hills to kind of like fill these reservoirs, and that helps the cattle in the hills. And with like less snowfall or like earlier like warm temperatures, that's melted, and so we haven't had the spring runoff that we rely on. And wildfires, we've had wildfires just like on our ranch, on neighboring ranches, and that can be pretty scary, not knowing like if your like home is safe or your livestock. We also have motels in Broadus, and so those can be affected by climate change also. For example, there was a fire just last summer. It was like caused by a coal seam, and Ashland and Lame Deer were evacuated. Ashland's only like 40 miles away from Broadus, and the highway was closed, so that affected our business a lot, because people weren't coming through the motels, and we lost like half our revenue in our peak month of August, because that's like during hunting season. And then also with extreme weather events like hail, that damages roofs and it damages crops. Just like a few weeks ago, it was just like a windstorm, but like the wind blew the hay off the meadows, and like they were in windrows, which are normally there to like protect the hay from wind, but it was like stronger wind than we've had in the past, so that method didn't work. And then it also tore down the pivot, like it just tore off the end and damaged that, and we're having to deal with that. And so now we can't run the pivots, and there's like also hail in that storm, and yeah, so there's quite a few effects. We've also seen like changes in wildlife, like just like one example is that with warmer temperatures, there's not like these frosts that kill like disease-carrying insects.
Why are you doing this in Montana?
Well, yeah, it seems kind of crazy that Montana's like the place where our case is the first one to go on to trial. Well, it's the first U.S. youth climate lawsuit to go on to trial, and so it's kind of crazy that's happening here, of all places, because there are also lawsuits in different states, and there's a national one, and then also ones in other countries with the OCT, and but it seems like fitting, and it seems like this case, like for me, it seems like it really connects with Montana values also. It's like about taking care of other people and the land, and I'm a 5th generation Montanan myself, and I'm inspired a lot by like those people like out here alone, and like working, and like it's kind of a hard life, you know, like ranching and being out here, but like people have always like relied on their neighbors, and kind of like built these strong communities, and so I just think we need to preserve that and like these resources and have those to pass on to future generations, right? Like in this country we've like been focused on like posterity, like it's in the Constitution and in state constitutions, and we're always thinking about the future, and so we need to like act with that as well, and make sure that our actions match those values, and yeah, just take care of the people, over money or things.
Why aren't older people doing more about this?
There is like kind of a generational difference, it seems like, but well, yeah, it's kind of frustrating, kind of like being a younger person, and I'm not really in, like my generation isn't really like in a position of power where we can like really make these changes, and so like the older generations like in power and who have known about this, it's really slow to, it's like been a long time since like we've known, and it's been a long time and people aren't taking action, so that's pretty frustrating. And like one thing I hear a lot is that like people are really proud of like our generation and younger people for like stepping up and doing these things, but I don't want like people to look to us yet, because we're not there yet. We're still like in school and learning, and and like people in power now like need to take responsibility, and they can't just like keep waiting for the next generation, because like our generation, we don't get to keep waiting, and so I think that's why like all this burden is like placed on us, because we're kind of like the stopping point. And yeah, and so like generations, like we all have the same values and want to like protect our like land and resources, like I said earlier, and so there shouldn't be a difference, and like we all need to contribute to this.
I don't know why, but I really liked that.
Like for me, it seems like it really connects with Montana values also. It's like about taking care of other people and the land. People in power now like need to take responsibility, and they can't just like keep waiting for the next generation, because like our generation, we don't get to keep waiting, and so I think that's why like all this burden is like placed on us, because we're kind of like the stopping point. I'm inspired a lot by like those people like out here alone, and like working, and like it's kind of a hard life, you know, like ranching and being out here, but like people have always like relied on their neighbors, and kind of like built these strong communities, and so I just think we need to preserve that and like these resources and have those to pass on to future generations.